former guys that claimed to have worked in the FBI who had been replaced by aliens. And what happened was clones stepped in, took over them, and just threw them in prison. And so they're sitting in prison while these aliens stepped in, took over their bodies, took over their lives. This whole thing was being able to download somebody's memories into another cloned being is true. They can do it. They can do it. And they can do it in a matter of seconds. You know, this whole cloning thing is far beyond, usually, and I've always said this, is when the government or the military announces something that they're going to do, like cloning. They've already been doing it for 40 years. And so what they'll do is once they've been doing something for 20 years, they'll start releasing it to the public domain to start conditioning the public to the fact that they're doing it. And they know that whenever they announce something and introduce it into the public domain, that the first thing the public's going to do is come up against it and reject it. And then as they keep going out with the information, eventually people accept it. And we've seen that kind of thing with the homosexual movement when it was first introduced to society. Well, it was not exactly introduced, never went anywhere, just in the background in the closet where it should have been. But what they did was they brought it out to light because they wanted their own rights. They wanted to live co-equally among heterosexual couples. And so they brought it out in the Jerry Springers, and they used all the media bases to do that. And then once people were through with having their fits and their hatreds and their anger about it, then people just eventually started accepting it. They got tired of fighting about it. They just accepted it. They went from standing up against it to just sitting down and ignoring it and letting somebody else take the fight against it. So now what do we have? We just have messes all over the place. States voting out or voting in. The legalization of homosexual marriages. Well, we're going to see the same thing with pedophilia. Pedophilia is coming to the forefront. And, like I said, Satan demands this of his followers, his worshipers, those who he has given power to and wealth to. They owe him. They owe him. And how do you pay Satan back? You sin. Because he needs to sin. He needs people. He needs his followers to commit atrocities and abominations on the innocent, and there's nobody more innocent than a child. And that's why you'll hear of these pedophilia rings in Washington, D.C., in Las Vegas. They're all over the world. Every government official or every government around this world is involved with pedophilia. That's why the UN is even involved with running child sex slave rings. Because they're all involved with it. It's big money. It's big trafficking, Sherman Skolnick was on my show last year, and we talked about John Kerry and his participation with snuff films. And to get to the point of a position of power in our government, you have to prove that you're worthy. So you have to really commit some abominations to prove your worthiness to be in power. And what he did to prove his worthiness of power was kill children on tape. Snuff films are nothing more than child porn, where they rape these children and kill them, and then they sell these videos, big underground market, and it's called snuff porn, and that's what John Kerry was into. And so, we've talked about some of Bush's sins on the show before. I don't know how much involved we've got into that. Bush is involved with pedophilia as well. He's a bisexual. They've all got sins in their closets, and everybody does, and I wouldn't even bring it out other than to point to the fact that they're paying, you have to pay the piper. You want to be in a position of leadership, you got to pay the piper back. He put you there, you owe him. And so, innocent people get hurt, innocent people get killed, women come out and try to write books. The fact of being White House slaves. We've heard of Kathy O'Brien, we've heard of Bryce Taylor. If you've ever read their books, you need to. These women were taken as children from the time they were 4 or 5 years old and used as sex slaves to presidents in the White House. And so the wickedness and evil, it knows no end. And it's all coming out. We just got a cowboy, the Jeff Gannon scandal in Washington, D.C. now with Jeff Gannon and the White House cowboy scandal. It's all unraveling. The Lord is bringing to light everything that's been taking place in the dark. Well, we've been screaming for years that these people in our government were Satanists, while the churches were supporting them and praying for them and declaring they're Christians, and kicking God's real people off of their lists and out of their groups and out of their churches for trying to wake them up. And on top of that, our government has been allowing aliens to mutilate animals, kidnap humans in exchange for technology, in exchange for microchips, lasers, free energy, and more. They cover up crashed UFOs. They lie about the abductions going on. Everything's lying and deceit and cover up and scandals. And this is why, because there's always general mayhem and chaos when the truth can't be told. When the truth is being buried, there's chaos. And that's why there's conspiracies. What is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is asking questions that people refuse to answer, that those in power refuse to answer. And so what happens when those questions are answered? What do you call it then? It's no longer a conspiracy. It's already been proven fact 1 million times over, and 60% of Americans in New York City know exactly what I'm talking about, that our government was involved in taking down the towers of the World Trade Center. Our government was involved with that. And so where's the accountability? What they did is, here we go, the ones guilty setting up their own judge-jury panel. I mean, come on. You know what? I'll tell you what. If I'm ever arrested for something guilty, I'm going to choose my own judge and jury. Okay? Allow us to choose our own judges and juries. And then everybody knew it was a con job then. And the only thing they got going for them now is a lawsuit. Money talks. They get hurt. All these families getting together from the WTC that are suing the government for their involvement in those towers coming down. You know darn well, if you have any lick of common sense in your head, that an airplane on the umpteenth floor of that building did not cause that whole building to tumble down. And we know that the explosive charges were put in the basements of those buildings. They were put in the walls of those buildings. It was a controlled demolition from the get-go. You could see it when the towers fell, that it was a controlled demolition. Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that a plane never hit the Pentagon, other than their own video simulation showing this small little plane sticking out of the Pentagon. Oh, give me a break. It was a total lie. It was a total facade of video manipulation by the press to make it look like there was a plane in the Pentagon. You won't find one piece of an airplane on the Pentagon. How can a plane crash into the Pentagon, create all that fire and destruction, and not one burn mark be on the grass? I mean, give me a break, folks. And I'm just an amateur at studying 911. I haven't put in half the time a lot of other people have. And it just unravels. You could spend a couple hours, a couple minutes. Go to letsroll911.org or .com, whatever it is. Put in 911 WTC in the search engine and do some research. Because you're not going to get very far before you realize that the whole thing was a mastermind implemented and carried out by our government. Why? Because they wanted a war in the Middle East. They needed a Pearl Harbor, and that's what they worked for, and that's what happened. Get Bush and Texas away from it, and reading a book upside down to second graders for a while, and get them out of the way, so the others could do their jobs. And that's basically what they did. They wanted to get into Afghanistan. They were having problems with the Taliban because the Taliban would no longer allow our government to grow marijuana crops on their soil. The United States is the #1 drug importer and trafficker in the world, and everybody knows it. I mean, everybody in the satanic circles, the New World Order. How many Americans know what our government is really into? They don't know. They don't know squat. And why? Because the media won't report on it. The media stopped answering tough questions a long time ago. You could have kissed goodbye to any kind of resourceful journalism when they kicked Sam Donaldson out of the White House. Now, he was the only one that kept them honest back then.